Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the course Developmental Biology. Today's lecture is Metamorphosis. I am Dr. Priya Goyal, working as Assistant Professor in Department of Zoology, Deen Dayal Upadhyay College, University of Delhi. This is the syllabus of Developmental Biology that we are following. We are done with Unit 1, 2 and 3 and today we'll take up Unit 4 in which we will start with the topic Metamorphosis. The concepts that we will study in today's lecture include what is metamorphosis, what are the various types of ontogenic development, how does metamorphosis happen in amphibians, what different metamorphic changes the amphibians undergo during metamorphosis, what is the hormonal control of amphibian metamorphosis, then metamorphosis in insects, what are the modes of insect development, different stages in metamorphosis, and finally, how the insect metamorphosis is controlled by hormones. So let us begin with metamorphosis. We will study metamorphosis mainly in amphibians and insects. So students, you began your life as a baby and then you grow a little until you are an adult. And while you are growing, the basic plan of your body does not change. You have the same basic body plan your whole life. If you compare yourself with other animals like insects, which grow in various stages, and the cycle of stages that they go through is known as metamorphosis. For many insects, the stages are so different from one another that you cannot recognize them as one single animal. The transformed adult is completely different from larva in form, structure, and habit. And it is the way insects grow and mature. Their lives are divided into separate stages for resting, growing, and reproducing. Similarly, in case of amphibians, you know that there is a young stage which is known as tadpole, which looks more like a fish, which has a tail, which has fins, and which has gills. And eventually the tadpole develops into an adult that is actually a frog which hops over instead of just swimming with the help of its paddled tail or with its fins. So all the stages that an animal goes through while it is developing from the young one to adult are involved in the process of metamorphosis. Now, before we begin with what is metamorphosis, we need to understand that there are two types of ontogenic developments. The type of development which does not involve a larval stage is known as a direct development. In a direct type of development, the young one is simply a smaller, less sexually mature form of the adult, as seen in humans and most other mammals. Whereas the indirect type of development is the one in which animal passes through a post-embryonic larval stage in its life cycle. And this larva then undergoes metamorphosis to become adult. The larva differs in form, that is its morphology, its behavior, as well as in its habitats and habits from the adult. Basically, larva acts as a means of growth and dispersal, whereas adult is specialized for reproduction. In indirect mode of development, larva that is present can be a primary or a secondary one. A larva is called primary when its body axis is different from that of the adult. For example, in sea urchins, the larva is bilaterally symmetrical, whereas the adult is pentamerous in nature. A larva is called secondary if its body axis is similar to that of the adult. For example, the tadpoles of frogs, the caterpillars of moths and butterflies, and the maggots of flies. So now we can define metamorphosis. It is a Greek word which means to transform. Dillman and Troop in 1986 defined metamorphosis as a radical transformation from larval life to the adult stage, which involves certain structural, physiological, biochemical, and behavioral changes. So metamorphosis is basically a developmental phenomena which involves transformation of immature larval form into adult, demonstrating dramatic changes. Metamorphosis can be influenced by hormones, because of which it is also known as hormonal reactivation of developmental processes, or it can be influenced by various environmental factors, as we will see in the slides ahead. Metamorphosis differs in different animals. This is with respect to the nature of transformation and the mode of occurrence of the whole sequence of metamorphosis. First of all, we will discuss the metamorphosis in amphibians. In amphibians, metamorphosis has a high rate, so it is completed in just a matter of few days. Amphibians belong to three different classes, as we know: the apodons or the limbless amphibians, the urodales or the tailed amphibians, which includes the salamanders and newts, and third are the anurans, which includes the frogs and toads. Now, in apodons, there is direct development, except a few like Typhlonectes, which show just a brief larval stage during their life cycle. In urodales, there are somewhat less drastic changes during metamorphosis as compared to anurans, which show dramatic developmental changes during their life cycle. Hence, anurans are the best example of metamorphosis among the vertebrates. This is the diagram of developmental history of the leopard frog Rana pipiens. Here we see that the leopard frog undergoes various stages of development during its life cycle. The male and the female gametes fuse to form a zygote, which undergoes cleavage to form first a morula, then a blastula, which undergoes gastrulation to form gastrula, the three germ layers, which during the process of organogenesis lay down different organs. And finally, they give rise to a structure known as larva, which is the immature stage. Now, the larval stages undergo metamorphosis to form the sexually mature adult, which further again starts producing gametes, and thus the whole cycle of process goes on. So, a fully aquatic tadpole larva develops into an adult terrestrial frog, which undergoes drastic changes during metamorphosis. Almost every organ undergoes modification. Like you see here, the paddle tail of the tadpole recedes while the hind limbs and forelimbs develop and differentiate in the adult frog. The cartilaginous tadpole skull is also replaced by the predominantly bony skull of the young frog. The horny teeth that the tadpole uses to tear up the pond plants disappear as the mouth and jaw take a new shape. The protrusible tongue muscles of the frog also develop. Meanwhile, the tadpole's lengthy intestine, which is a characteristic of herbivores, shortens to suit the more carnivorous diet of the adult frog. The gills regress and the lungs enlarge to help it in terrestrial respiration. So, amphibian metamorphosis is initiated by hormones from the tadpole's thyroid gland itself. And the pace at which metamorphosis will occur is again a play to the environmental factors. Various metamorphic changes are classified into three types in amphibians. The first are the ecological, which involve change in habitat of the organism as it metamorphoses. Number two are the morphological changes, which involve change in form or morphology of the organism. Third are the physiological changes, which involve change in function of different body parts during metamorphosis. Among anurans, the ecological changes involve: number one, change in habitat. The larva is aquatic or freshwater in nature, while the adult is terrestrial in nature. The tadpole feeds on the algae which it scrapes from the bottom of the pond. Hence, it has got a horny lining inside the mouth, which is replaced with a sticky tongue in adults, which is used as a protrusible organ to catch its prey, which are the insects mainly. So the tadpole is herbivorous in nature. It is basically the detritus feeder which scrapes algae from the bottom of the ponds in which it lives, while the adult is carnivorous in nature, which feeds on small insects, worms, and some small invertebrates. Among Urodales, there are not much ecological changes that happen since both larva and adult are aquatic in nature and both are carnivorous. Various morphological changes are classified further into three types. The first being the regressive changes, which means that structures or organs which were required during larval stage but no more required in the adult stage, they are reduced or disappeared. In progressive changes, some new organs develop or become functional in the adult, which were earlier either not present or not functional in the larva. In remodeling, some already present structures change to meet the requirements of adult life, and remodeling changes majorly happen in skin, intestine, and brain. So regressive changes are the following. Since the larva is aquatic in nature and the adult are terrestrial in nature, so the aortic arches, bronchial arteries, external gills, and the bronchial clefts, which are required in gill respiration in water in the tadpole, are no more required and hence they are lost, and they give way to the respiratory organs in the terrestrial frogs. The ventral suckers disappear. The tail and caudal fin, which are required for swimming in water, which are helpful to the tadpole, they are also lost. The horny teeth and horny lining of the jaws are shed off. The lateral line system disappears. The cloacal tube shortens and reduces in length because the tadpole is herbivorous. It requires a longer intestine, while the adult is carnivorous. It requires a shorter intestine. In progressive changes, first of all, the growth and differentiation of forelimbs and hind limbs happen, which are helpful in the adult forms of frogs. Formation of hyoid apparatus from gill arches occurs to form hyoid arch, which is the tongue supporting apparatus. Development of middle ear from first pharyngeal pouch is complete. Formation of tympanic membrane with the circular tympanic cartilage is another progressive change that happens. Bulging of eyes on the dorsal surface of head and development of nictitating membrane as well as eyelids. Remodeling of larval structures, predominantly in the integument, involve the following changes. The integument changes to a stratified squamous form. It develops an outer keratinized layer, which is characteristic of the adult annulus. It also develops a well-developed dermis and mucus and granular glands, which primarily function to secrete antimicrobial peptides. A characteristic pattern of pigmentation is also formed. Alimentary canal shortens, its coils generally straighten out, the tongue lengthens and increase in thickness because now the adult has to have a protrusible tongue. The liver and pancreas become functional. Heart, which was earlier a two-chambered, now becomes a three-chambered organ in adult. Mesonephros replaces the pronephric kidney of the tadpole. Lungs grow in size. They develop thoracic muscles for pulmonary respiration in the adult. Skeleton becomes more and more ossified. Bone replaces cartilage. Eyes are reorientation. They become frontal as compared to their lateral position in tadpole, and this suits the predatory nature of the adult. Much of the nervous system is also remodeled. The brain enlarges, becomes more differentiated, while the neurons also grow and they innervate new targets in the tongue, jaws, and thoracic muscles. Now, the physiological changes involve the following. The mode of excretion changes from ammoniotelic to ureotelic. That means the major nitrogenous waste, which was earlier ammonia in the aquatic tadpole, changes to urea in the terrestrial adult. The visual pigment in the tadpole was porphyropsin, which is gradually replaced with rhodopsin in the adult. Various digestive and autolytic enzymes begin to be secreted. That pigment changes from larval to adult type, which has got a higher oxygen carrying capacity. The site of erythropoiesis also changes from liver to bone marrow and spleen, while there is reduction of the total body mass. Now, this may happen with the loss of some body parts or reduction in size of some others. Certain biochemical changes are also associated with metamorphosis in neurons. The first and the foremost being the conversion of ammonia to urea. As we just said, ammonia is the predominant nitrogenous waste in the aquatic tadpoles, while urea is the major nitrogenous waste in the adult neurons, which are terrestrial in nature. So liver begins to synthesize the enzymes of urea cycle, which is majorly dependent on the thyroid hormones and hence called the thyroid hormone dependent synthesis. As you see, the enzymes involved in urea cycle, the carbamoyl phosphate synthase, ornithine carbamoyl transferase, arginosuccinate synthetase, and arginosuccinate lyase are all dependent on the thyroid hormones. Endocrine function of the pancreas also begins. The serum albumin and proteins begin to increase. Hemoglobin involves some changes in its properties and also its biosynthesis. Now, among the urodeles, metamorphosis is less striking as compared to neurons. Though the skin thickens and develops multicellular skin glands and pigmentation, eyes also undergo reorientation and there is formation of eyelids, limbs grow and differentiate. However, the tail is retained, caudal fins are disappeared, head becomes more oval. Branchial apparatus is reduced while the external gills also become reduced and the gill clefts close. Now let us discuss the hormonal control of amphibian metamorphosis. So predominantly we will study here the role of thyroid hormone, which depends on the hypothalamo-hypophyseal axis and thyroid gland. And the second hormone that comes to play its role is prolactin. The role of thyroid gland in amphibian metamorphosis was first demonstrated by Goodenough in 1912, who found that tadpoles metamorphosed prematurely when they were fed powdered horse thyroid glands. Allen in 1916 further did another experiment. He said that removal or destruction of thyroid rudiment of early tadpoles could prevent metamorphosis among those tadpoles. Rather, the larvae developed into giant tadpoles. So these tadpoles could metamorphose when given dry powdered thyroid gland, which could belong to the same or different species. Alternatively, when these tadpoles were kept in water containing thyroid extract or even iodine, or when they were injected with iodine, or even when the iodine crystals were planted into the body cavity of the thyroidectomized tadpoles, they could metamorphose. Further studies showed that sequential steps of neuron metamorphosis are regulated by increasing amounts of thyroid hormone. There is another experiment by Etkin in 1968 who concluded that spacing between metamorphic events depends on the concentration of thyroid hormone. Etkin gave the concept of pre-metamorphosis, post-metamorphosis, and metamorphic climax on the basis of his experiment, depending on the concentration of thyroid hormone. So the hormones of hypothalamo-hypophyseal axis and thyroid gland control metamorphosis in neurons. There are two major set of hormones, the thyroid hormones, which are T3 and T4, that is the triiodothyronin, T3, and tetraiodothyronin or thyroxine, the T4, and the prolactin. And different hormones are secreted at different stages of development and differentiation. Now, as you see in this diagram here, changes in the environment such as temperature and light or an increase in nutritional levels with the growth of larva causes the secretion of corticotropin releasing hormone, that is CRH, from the hypothalamus, which acts on the pituitary to release the thyroid stimulating hormone or the TSH. Now, this further acts on the thyroid glands to stimulate the secretion of thyroid hormones, thyroxine, that is T4, and triiodothyronin, which is T3, which causes metamorphosis. Now, the thyroid hormones also act on the hypothalamus and pituitary to maintain the synthesis of CRH and TSH. Hypothalamus also secretes prolactin inhibiting hormone, that is PIH or dopamine, which acts on the pituitary to inhibit the secretion of prolactin. The growth and maintenance of larval functions is actually a function of this prolactin. So the levels of both the thyroid hormones, which are secreted by the thyroid gland, that is T3 and T4 levels, as well as the prolactin, determines the onset of metamorphosis in amphibians. The precursor for thyroid hormones is the thyroglobulin, which has got a molecular weight of 67.5 kilodalton. Now, removal of globulin from the thyroglobulin precursor, as well as its iodination, converts it into the hormone thyroxine. Thyroxine is further acted upon by type 2 deiodinase enzyme, which cleaves off one iodine atom from the outer ring of T4 to convert it into a more active form, that is the T3 hormone or the triiodothyronine. Further, type 3 deiodinase enzyme acts on T3, which removes the iodine atom from the inner ring of T3 to convert it further into an inactive form, that is T2 or diiodothyronine. Though T4 is relatively inactive hormone, its concentration is higher in the blood, while T3 is the more active or the more potent of the two. Once the T3 hormone is formed, it binds to the thyroid hormone receptors, which are predominantly the nuclear receptors. There are two types of thyroid hormone receptors, alpha and beta, which are named as thyroid receptor alpha, TR alpha, and the thyroid receptor beta, that is TR beta. Now, these thyroid receptors, they form dimers with retinoid receptor RXR, and thus they form the complex TR-RXR. This TR-RXR complex binds T3 when it enters the nucleus. Now, the complex which is formed is T3-TR-RXR, which activates the genes for transcription by the process of histone acetylation, and this causes metamorphosis in the amphibians. Now, important to note here is that the thyroid hormone receptor TR alpha is present in all tissues even before the onset of metamorphosis, whereas the number of thyroid receptor beta increases only during metamorphosis, and it results in more drastic changes in the larva. These nuclear receptors have higher affinity for T3 as compared to T4. That is why T3 is considered to be a more potent hormone as compared to T4. Secondly, even before the T3 hormone binds to TR-RXR complex, this complex exists. And till the time the T3 hormone has bound to this TR-RXR complex, it acts as a repressor of the gene transcription. But once the hormone T3 binds to this complex, the complex that is now formed T3 TR-RXR has got entirely different function. That is, it activates the genes rather than repressing it, and thus it activates the process of transcription. This illustration shows the three stages of metamorphosis that are based on the concentration of thyroid hormones in the blood. If you remember, these three stages were given by an experiment done by Aitken in 1968. Now here it is the ratio of thyroid hormone to prolactin, which actually regulates the onset, timing, and proper sequence of metamorphosis. During the first stage, that is the pre-metamorphosis, an exogenous signal instructs the hypothalamus to release thyrotropin-releasing hormone TRH. Now the pituitary and thyroid glands have just begun to mature. So there are very low levels of the thyroid hormones T4 and even low levels of T3. Though the prolactin levels are high. So the thyroid hormone to prolactin levels are low. So this stage pre-metamorphosis stimulates the growth of larva with very little developmental change. Here the thyroid receptor alpha is present, but thyroid receptor beta at this stage is not there. Now as the thyroid matures to the stage of pro-metamorphosis, it begins to secrete more thyroid hormones. At the same time, high TSH levels and high thyroid levels give positive feedback to hypothalamus for more secretion of thyrotropin releasing hormone. At the same time, the prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH, is also being produced by hypothalamus. But now the thyroid hormone to prolactin levels are higher. So that means the developmental changes start to happen at this stage, prometamorphosis. Like hind limbs begin to grow, gills become internal, and shortening of tail of the tadpole begins to happen. Then comes the metamorphic climax stage. Here the concentration of the thyroid hormone T4 rises dramatically, and the thyroid receptor beta levels also increase, so that the thyroid hormone to prolactin ratio is very high, and at the same time prolactin is not produced now. So it is this stage, that metamorphic climax stage, that all the major changes such as tail resorption, gill resorption, and intestinal remodeling occur. Here, thyroid receptor beta is the principal receptor which mediates the metamorphosis. Then we move on to the next illustration here. Here you see again the three different stages of metamorphosis are shown: the pre-metamorphosis, the pro-metamorphosis, and then the metamorphic climax. Here you see pro-metamorphosis is also termed early metamorphosis because it is this stage when the metamorphosis begins to happen. Now looking at this pre-metamorphosis stage, where you see there are low thyrotropin levels. So low thyroid hormone concentration and low thyroid hormone T3 receptor concentration is present. So that means there is less transcription or virtually no transcription of the T3 receptor gene, because at this time no thyroid hormone is bound to its receptor. That means no metamorphosis is happening in pre-metamorphosis stage. When metamorphosis reaches the second stage, then the thyrotropin levels begin to be rise. Then the T3, T4 concentration increases and they are able to bind to the T3 receptor, whose concentration is also increasing by this time. And here you see that T3 receptor binds to its receptor, T3 receptor binds to its hormone, which stimulates the production of more T3 receptors. And this leads to transcription of the genes which are responsible for metamorphosis. The third stage of metamorphic climax, where actually most of the metamorphosis happens. At this time, the thyrotropin levels are quite high, the thyroid hormone concentration is quite high, and also the T3 receptor concentration, majorly the thyroid receptor beta concentration, is quite high. Now, the binding of T3 to its receptor leads to increased transcription of the genes which are responsible for producing proteins that cause metamorphosis. And here you see that there is increased transcription of T3 induced genes is shown, and increased transcription is shown. So basically, the tissues that respond earliest to the thyroid hormones are those that express high levels of the conversion enzymes, we can say, and the conversion enzyme of T4 to T3, which we just studied in the previous slide, is the deiodinase 2, which is able to convert T4 directly into T3. And these tissues include the limb rudiments, which have high levels of both deiodinase 2 and thyroid receptor alpha, and thus they are able to convert T4 into T3, and also they are able to use T3 immediately through the TR alpha receptor. That is why limbs start developing during the early stages of metamorphosis. Also, the more T3 receptor a tissue has, the more competent it should be to respond to small amounts of T3, because it leads to auto production and auto stimulation of its receptors. Thus, the metamorphic climax is the time when the visible changes of metamorphosis occur rapidly, which may be brought about by the enhanced production and induction of more T3 receptors. Here, this diagram shows the metamorphosis of the frog. In A part, you see the photograph that shows a tadpole lying here and an adult bullfrog, which is lying afloat in the pond. So huge changes can be observed when we contrast the tadpole and the adult bullfrog. especially the changes in the jaw structure and the appearance of limbs. Here we can see very clearly. Now the diagrams B to F, they show the various stages of the frog that is undergoing metamorphosis. So here the B diagram shows the structure of a pre-metamorphosing tadpole. So here you see there is an extended tail with a tail fin, gills are present, and no limbs are present. The C diagram shows the tadpole which is present in the pro-metamorphic stage. Here you see the extension of hind limbs can be observed clearly. The D diagram shows the appearance of forelimbs also, which means that it is the beginning of metamorphic climax. And E and F stages show the regression of tail, the resorption of gills, and the reorientation of eyes and all the other structures that begin to be happen actually during the metamorphosis. So E and F clearly show the metamorphic climax stage. Now, one thing important to know about metamorphosis in amphibians is that during different stages of metamorphosis, the tadpole does not respond to any concentration of thyroid hormone that is being produced. Rather, it responds to certain threshold levels of the thyroid hormone at various stages. So each tissue responds when certain threshold, that is some minimum level of thyroid hormone is produced. Long exposure to low dose of thyroid hormone is responsible for development of limbs during metamorphosis, while higher doses are responsible for other metamorphic changes like resorption of tail and remodeling of intestine, which occur during successive metamorphic events. So, successive metamorphic events actually respond to higher threshold levels of thyroid hormone than the preceding ones. And it's not that directly we can give a certain amount of thyroid hormone to the tadpole and it will suddenly become frog in a day. Rather, if the tadpole is subjected to quite high doses of thyroid hormone directly, it leads to some chaotic development in the tadpoles, which ultimately leads to their death. Another important thing to know about metamorphosis in amphibians is that they have this property of regional and organ specificity. And what is the evidence for regional and organ specificity in amphibians during metamorphosis? It is that different regions of the tadpole body respond to thyroid hormone at different times. Depending upon the amount of thyroid hormone, that is T3, which is the more active form of the hormone, and also to the amount of thyroid receptors to which T3 bind and thus is able to cause metamorphosis in their cells. We have seen that the same stimulus causes degenerative changes in one tissue of the tadpole and it causes growth and differentiation in some other part while it is undergoing metamorphosis. For example, the thyroid hormone is able to instruct the limb bud muscles to grow, but at the same time it instructs the tail to undergo resorption. Now, resorption of tail occurs quite quickly and it occurs by the process of apoptosis. During apoptosis, the macrophages come and collect in the tail region and they start eating up the cells of the tail, which is followed by eating up all the debris, and this all happens by the production of various enzymes like collagenases and metalloproteinases by the macrophages. So virtually the tail acts as a reservoir of all the proteinase enzymes at the time of apoptosis. Now, during metamorphic climax, it means that the tail skin is instructed to undergo apoptosis. There are several other parts of the skin also which are instructed to undergo apoptosis during metamorphic climax. Like the tail epidermis here acts differently than the head or trunk epidermis. And this is possible because of the presence of certain stem cells in the epithelium, known as the epithelial stem cells or the ESCs, which allows the tadpole's head and body to generate new epidermis. However, these epithelial stem cells are absent in the tail epidermis, which does not allow the generation of any new skin in the tail once it is resorbed. Now, regional specificity or the organ specificity during frog metamorphosis has been demonstrated with the help of an experiment also. in which the tail tip was transplanted to the trunk of another tadpole which was undergoing metamorphosis, and at the same time the eye cup was transplanted from one tadpole to another while it was undergoing metamorphosis in the trunk. Now, it was observed that during metamorphosis, the tail tip tissue is not protected from degeneration. Its fate is to undergo degeneration, and it undergoes that degeneration along with the degenerating tail of the host tadpole. However, the eye cup is not meant to undergo degeneration or regression, and it does not regress even when it is placed in the tail region. That means even when it is placed in the vicinity of the cells of the tail, which all of which are undergoing degeneration. It protects itself from undergoing regression or degeneration. So after the tail gets resorbed, the eye cup is able to fuse itself with the trunk region, and it remains as an appendage at the posterior end of the tail only, as you see here. So the tail tip was fated to degenerate, and even when transplanted to another tadpole, it undergoes degeneration along with the degenerating tail. But at the same time, this eye cup, which was not meant to degenerate, does not undergo degeneration even when placed in the degenerating organ of this tadpole. So these experiments clearly indicate that the way a tissue will respond to thyroid hormones is not changed by its relocation in the metamorphosing body of a larva. Rather, it is inherent in the tissue itself, irrespective of its position in the larva. Apart from the usual process of metamorphosis, there are some amphibians which undergo heterochrony. Heterochrony, a Greek word in which hetero means others and chronos means time. So heterochrony can be defined as a genetically controlled phenomena, showing difference in the time of appearance or rate of a developmental process in an organism as compared to its ancestors. So this rate of developmental process can be an increased one or a decreased one. When this rate of developmental process is decreased, the condition is called pedomorphism. So pedomorphism means a juvenile developmental condition of heterochrony where the reproductive organism is more juvenile than its ancestors used to be at that particular stage. That means the rate of development is actually slowed down. Pedomorphism is of two types further. The first is neoteny and the second is progenesis. Neoteny refers to retention of the juvenile form owing to retardation of body development relative to that of the germ cells and gonads, which are able to achieve maturity at the normal time. Now, when does this happen? This happens when the germ cell development of an organism is taking place at the required rate, but the somatic cell development is retarded, because of which the sexual development is normal, but the growth and development of other body cells and other cellular activities is retarded. An example of neoteny can be seen in various species of Ambystoma salamanders. We now know the general scheme of hormonal regulation which is involved in amphibian metamorphosis. Any disparity from this scheme at any step, maybe the absence of thyroid stimulating hormone or thyroid hormone or even the thyroid receptor, leads to alteration in metamorphosis of the amphibian. Now, in certain salamanders, sexual maturity occurs in the larval stage. The reproductive system and germ cells mature, while the rest of the body retains its juvenile form throughout life, because of which metamorphosis fails to occur and sexual maturity takes place in the larval body. As you see here, the Mexican larva of Ambystoma mexicanum does not undergo metamorphosis under natural conditions. This happens because its pituitary gland does not release the thyroid stimulating hormone, because of which the T3 hormone does not form in the thyroid glands, and artificial supply of thyroid hormone or thyroid stimulating hormone allows it to metamorphose into an adult form. Similarly, the neotenic populations of Embystoma tigrinum can be induced to undergo metamorphosis simply by placing them in water at little higher temperatures. However, the neotenic species of Plecurus and Siren remain unresponsive to thyroid hormones. That means that their neoteny is permanent. This might happen because of the absence of thyroid receptor beta in Necturus, which makes it unresponsive to thyroid hormone T3, even though it is present. The second term is progenesis, which refers to the retention of juvenile form when the gonads and germ cells develop at a faster rate than normal and become sexually mature, while the rest of the body is still in a juvenile phase. So progenesis involves an accelerated germ cell growth and normal somatic cell growth. Whereas in neoteny we studied that the germ cell growth is normal while the somatic cell growth is below normal. Thus, progenesis gives accelerated sexual maturation. Progenesis is a much faster and rapid process in which the juvenile organisms show advanced sexual characteristics such as the secondary sexual characteristics. Progenesis modifies skeletal development in Bolitoglossa occidentalis, thereby allowing it to find a new ecological niche. Now, this tropical salamander, unlike other members of its genus, lives in trees. That is, it has got an arboreal existence. And this is possible because of the presence of webbed feet, which help it in climbing, and a small body size with a small tail. It resembles the juvenile of its related species, Bolitoglossa subpalmata and Bolitoglossa rostrata, whose young are small and whose digits have not yet grown past their webbing when the same stages of these three are compared. Now, Bolitoglossa occidentalis undergoes metamorphosis at a much smaller size than its relatives. So this was all about metamorphosis in amphibians. Now we move on to the second section of our lecture, that is metamorphosis in insects. Now, insect metamorphosis involves periodic shedding of cuticle of the skin, which is accompanied by growth of the organism. Because the strongly sclerotized parts of the cuticle cannot spread sufficiently to accommodate the growing mass of the body inside. And this metamorphosis includes a special form of molting in which new cuticle is secreted by epidermis of the skin. So insects are covered by a cuticle, which is a hard extracellular coat secreted by the epidermis. But since the cuticle has only a limited capacity for expansion, so as to contain the growing mass of the body inside, it has to be shed off and replaced. And this involves a series of molds or ecdysis. Now, at each ecdysis, the epidermis withdraws from the old cuticle, proliferates, and forms a soft cuticle relatively larger than the old one. The growing individual inside the old cuticle with another layer of new cuticle exerts pressure to shed off the old cuticle. During molds, insects undergo change in body form and structure in a process known as metamorphosis. Now, as we discussed in the very first slide of our lecture, the larvae or young ones differ a lot from adult insects in morphology, habitats, and habits. Insect larvae are primarily devoted to eating voraciously, while the adults can fly and disperse, and they are mainly committed to reproduction. This illustration shows the different types or the different modes of insect development, namely the ametabolous, hemimetabolous, and the holometabolous. Here, different molds are represented as arrows, and different stages are shown during each of the three different types of modes of development. Now, in ametabolous type of development or the direct mode of development, there is no larval stage, which means there is no metamorphosis, because of which it is called ametabolous, that is without metamorphosis, or also known as the direct mode of development. Here, the young one which hatches from the egg is a miniature of the adult and is called the pro-nymph, as you see here. Now, it differs from the adult in simply having immature reproductive organs and in armature of spines and setae. By several moltings, as you see here, and growth, it becomes an adult. Now, these insects are primitively wingless. They are also called aterygota. So, ametabolous metamorphosis occurs in the aterygotes, for example, the silverfish or the lepisma and the springtail. The second type of mode is the hemimetabolous mode, which is known as hemi here means semi. So this means that little metamorphosis occurs here, and this is also known as the gradual mode. And this happens in the winged insects. And these winged insects belong to the category of exotericoids. So here, slight gradual changes occur from nymph to adult. And after spending a very brief period of time as a pro-nymph, whose cuticle is often shed as the insect hatches, the insect starts to look like an immature adult and is called a nymph or instar stage, as you see here. And in aquatic forms, this nymph is known as naiad, which has a general resemblance to the adult in form, in the type of mouth parts, and in the position of compound eye. Now, the rudiments of the wings, genital organs, and other structures are present, and they become progressively more mature with each molt. Wings also develop gradually as external outgrowths from thoracic region of the body and are visible externally in the nymphal instars, because of which it is known as exoterygota, means external outgrowths from the thoracic region of the body give rise to the wings, because of which exo prefix is used here. Now, at the final molt, the emerging insect is winged and sexually mature, and here the adult is known as imago. The third mode of development is the holometabolous. Holo means complete. So that is why it is known as the complete mode of development or the holometabolous. Now, in this type, as you see, there is no pronymphal stage. The metamorphic stages are included, namely the egg, larva, which can be a caterpillar, grub, or maggot, then a pupa, and finally the adult. Now, the young one which hatches from the egg is called a larva, which is very different from the adult in form, structure, type of mouth parts, legs, and mode of life. It feeds voraciously, it grows, it moves around, and it molts several times, during which the different stages are called instars. Now, after the final instar, the larva undergoes a metamorphic mold to become a pupa, which remains inside a secreted case. And this case is called a puparium. And during this stage, the pupa does not feed. It rather utilizes all the stored food reserves that it has got while the larva was feeding voraciously. And this pupa undergoes the final mold to form the adult. And this final mold is called the imaginal mold. And the last stage of mold is called eclosis. So we say that the adult ecloses from the pupal stage. Now, the number of larval molds before becoming an adult is characteristic of a species. Although environmental factors can increase or decrease this number, the larval instars grow in a stepwise fashion, and each instar being larger than the previous one. So appendages are formed, muscles, trachea, and parts of the alimentary canal are replaced by corresponding organs of the imago or the adult. And such vast changes happen here, because of which it is known as the holometabolous form of development. Wings develop in this case of insects from internal imaginal discs, because of which the category of insects that undergo holometabolous development are known as endotericoids. For example, the beetles, butterflies, bees, wasps, mosquitoes, and flies. Now, during pupation, which occurs during the holometabolous mode of development, most larval structures are destroyed systematically by the process of programmed cell death or apoptosis. Each part of the adult develops from a group of undifferentiated nest of cells present in the pupa, which is called an imaginal disc. So what is an imaginal disc? Imaginal disc is a group of formative cells which are set aside in the larva in the pockets of its epithelium. These formative cells do not have any role to play in the formation of larval organs. They lie silent in the larva and they become active only during pupation. Thus, they are called the rudiments of future organs of the adult or imago. Under the influence of metamorphic hormones, these nest of undifferentiated cells or the imaginal discs, they evert to form organs of the adult such as legs, mouth parts, internal organs and wings. And this process of formation of organs of an imago from the imaginal discs inside the pupa is known as histogenesis. Most of the imaginal discs are present in paired conditions, except the genital imaginal disc, whose fate is to give rise to external genitalia and anal structures in the adult. Imaginal discs lie predetermined in the larval stage itself, which has been confirmed with various transplantation experiments done on insect larvae, done by Hedon in 1968. So that means that the cells of the imaginal discs have predetermined fates. They know which organs they have to make in the adult organ. Now there are various stages in the metamorphosis of an insect. The first stage being apolysis, which involves synthesis of a new exoskeleton underneath the hard old exoskeleton. Now the old exoskeleton becomes hard, while the new exoskeleton that is being developed underneath it is soft and wrinkled. And this duration of formation of new exoskeleton under the hard old one ranges from days to weeks. It varies with the species and the growth rate of an insect. And this is accompanied with high ecdysteroid secretion. During apolysis, first of all, the epicuticle is laid by the epidermis, which lies under the skeleton. This epicuticle mainly consists of cuticulin. Next phase involves the digestion of old cuticle under the epicuticle. Now here the molting glands secrete fluid with certain enzymes which come to lie in between the epicuticle and the old cuticle, and they start digesting the old cuticle. Next stage involves laying down of inner layers of the new cuticle by the epidermis. These inner layers under the epicuticle is first the exocuticle and then the endocuticle. The exocuticle mainly consists of cuticulin and certain phenolic substances, while the endocuticle is predominantly consisting of protein and chitin. After apolysis, the old exoskeleton has to be shed off. So here, during ecdysis, the concentration of prothoracic growth hormone falls as the neurosecretory cells in the ventral ganglia begin to secrete the eclosion hormone, which helps in eclosis of the adult from the pupa. Now, the new cuticle has to undergo the process of hardening and darkening. Now, darkening of the new cuticle occurs by virtue of cross-linking of the phenolic substances present in the exocuticle, and this is termed sclerotization. During this, the exocuticle darkens and also gets strengthened. So even after the new cuticle has been laid down, there is continued secretion of endocuticle by the underlying epidermis for some days, while the exoskeleton continues to be thickened. And finally, the larva breaks open the old cuticle and emerges out by the process of eclosion. So here we see that the insect metamorphosis also includes some retrogressive as well as some progressive changes. Retrogressive changes include resorption of the old cuticle, necrosis of some epidermal cells, and destruction of some larval muscles, while the progressive changes include construction of the new cuticle with each mold and rearrangement and proliferation of epidermal cells lying underneath the skeleton. Next, we will discuss the hormonal control of metamorphosis in insects. The hormonal control of metamorphosis in insects was first described by the scientist Wigglesworth in the 1930s. He worked on the insect Rhodnius prolixus, which is a blood-sucking bug. And this insect has 5 instars in its life cycle, which shows incomplete metamorphosis. During insect metamorphosis, there are 2 major effector hormones that come to play their role. The first is 20-hydroxyecdysone or the 20E. This is the activated form of ecdysone. It works to initiate and coordinate each molt during the development of the insect. That is larva to larva, larva to pupa, as well as pupa to adult. It regulates the changes in gene expression that accompany during each stage during metamorphosis. Here you see the first structure is of the juvenile hormone. The second structure shows the ecdysone, which has got a molecular formula C27H44O6. It has got this structure which undergoes activation to form the 20-hydroxyecdysone or the 20E, which is actually the molting hormone. The second important hormone is the juvenile hormone or the neotenin. Now, high levels of this juvenile hormone prevent the ecdysone-induced changes in gene expression necessary for metamorphosis. Juvenile hormone is produced by secretory cells of Corpora elata, which are active during larval molts but inactive during metamorphic mold, because of which the production of juvenile hormone stops during later stages of development. Juvenile, the word stands for young one. So the juvenile hormone means the hormone which continues the production of young one from the consequent molts. The next important hormone that plays its role in the insect metamorphosis is the prothoracicotrophic hormone PTTH or the brain hormone, which is secreted by neurosecretory cells of the brain. The prothoracicotrophic hormone is secreted in response to certain neural, hormonal, or environmental signals that initiate the process of metamorphosis in insects. And this is a peptide hormone with a molecular weight of approximately 40,000. This illustration shows the general pathway of insect metamorphosis. As we discussed previously, when an immature insect has grown sufficiently, it requires a larger cuticle because the growing mass of body cannot accommodate itself in the old cuticle. And then the sensory input from the body activates certain neurosecretory cells in the brain. So in response to these endogenous, the neural or some hormonal or even some environmental signals, as are seen in some species of insects, the neurosecretory cells of the brain release prothoracicotrophic hormone, PTTH, or the brain hormone. Now, this hormone initiates the process of metamorphosis or molting. PTTH stimulates the prothoracic gland, which are a pair of small glands in the first thoracic segment of the insect body, to produce the prothoracic gland hormone or the ecdysone, which is an ecdysteroid. So named since it induces ecdysone. So ecdysone is converted to its active form, the molting hormone, which is the 20-hydroxyecdysone in the peripheral tissues. Now, each molt is triggered by a surge of this ecdysone hormone in the hemolymph of the insect. So 20-hydroxyecdysone is released in pulses, and each pulse corresponds to each molt. Each molt is initiated by one or sometimes more pulses of 20-hydroxyecdysone. The first pulse of 20-hydroxyecdysone produces a small rise in its concentration in the larval hemolymph or the larval blood. And it helps in proliferation of epidermis during a larval molt. The second molt is able to produce quite larger amounts of 20-hydroxyecdysone, and this initiates the differentiation events associated with molting. These pulses of 20-hydroxy-ecdysone commit and stimulate the epidermal cells to synthesize enzymes which are able to digest the old cuticle and synthesize the new one. Now, the second important enzyme here is the juvenile hormone. Now, juvenile hormone is secreted by the corpora elata, which exist as clusters of secretory cells at the base of brain. Important to note here is that corpora elata, they undergo regression after the molting is completed and the process of metamorphosis is completed and the adult is formed. But again, they become active when the insect has to reproduce. If you remember, we studied the role of juvenile hormone in yolk production in the insect egg. It also has certain roles in the adult of the males, reproductive functions it has in the adult male insect also. Okay, now coming back here. Now, this juvenile hormone is secreted by corpora elata, which exists as clusters of secretory cells at the base of brain. Juvenile hormone essentially inhibits metamorphosis and retains larval characters. At high juvenile hormone concentration, larval to larval molts are produced. The secretory cells of the corpora elata are active during larval molts, but they become inactive during the metamorphic mold that forms pupa and the imaginal mold that forms adult or imago. Now, as long as this juvenile hormone is present, the 20-hydroxy-ecdysone stimulated molds result in a new larval instar only. And in the last larval instar, however, the medial nerve from the brain to corpora elata inhibits these glands from producing juvenile hormone, and there is simultaneous increase in the body's ability to degrade all the juvenile hormone that is present in the body. So both these things, they help in removing whole of the juvenile hormone from the body, and thus the juvenile hormone levels drop below a critical threshold value, and this triggers the release of prothoracicotropic hormone from the brain. This prothoracicotropic hormone in turn stimulates the prothoracic gland to secrete a small amount of ecdysone, and the resulting pulse of 20-hydroxy-ecdysone in the absence of juvenile hormone now commits the epidermal cells for pupal development. So the larva-specific mRNAs are not replaced, and at this time the new mRNAs are synthesized, whose protein products will be able to inhibit the transcription of the larval messages. So at this final imaginal mold, the 20-hydroxy-ecdysone acts in the absence of juvenile hormone, and the imaginal discs are able to differentiate fully to form the organs of the adult. So finally, the adult is able to form. So let us discuss the mechanism of hormone action. Since we have studied how the hormones are produced during metamorphosis, let us have some insight into the mechanism of their action also. Now, once the 20-hydroxy-ecdysone is produced, it binds to certain nuclear receptors, which are the ecdysone receptors here as the ECRs. If you remember, we studied the presence of nuclear receptors, thyroid receptors, TR-alpha and TR-beta, which bind to thyroid hormones during the amphibian metamorphosis. So similar mechanism of action occurs in the insects also during metamorphosis, that the hormones bind to nuclear proteins which further dimerize to form an active complex, and they act as the transcription factor, and finally they are able to recruit certain methyl transferases to activate the genes which are responsible for metamorphosis. So here the 20-hydroxy-ecdysone binds to its nuclear proteins or the nuclear receptors, which are the ecdysone receptors or the ECRs. Now these ecdysone receptors dimerize with USP, that is the ultraspirical protein, and thus they form an active ECR-USP receptor complex. And once this ECR-USP receptor complex binds to the hormone 20-hydroxy-ecdysone, they form a special complex which itself acts as the transcription factor. This transcription factor is able to recruit certain histone methyl transferases and thus activate the ecdysone responsive genes. Now, the effect of ecdysone binding to target genes results in some puffing patterns of the polytene chromosomes as seen in the dipteran larva. During the late third instar larva and pupal stage, the polytene chromosomes of the salivary glands become very large and distinct. The chromosomal puffs thereby indicate signal transcription. Each stage of metamorphosis is characterized by a specific pattern of puffs. Each puff is assigned a cytogenetic map, and thus the pattern of these puffs keeps changing and directly reveals which genes are transcribed at successive stages of metamorphosis. So this was all about the metamorphosis in amphibians and in insects, along with the hormonal regulation in the metamorphosis. Now let us have a quick revision of the lecture. In the lecture, we discussed that an animal may show direct or indirect development during its life cycle. In indirect development, the young one or larva may be a primary or a secondary one. The immature larvae undergo metamorphosis to transform into adult, demonstrating dramatic changes in form, habitats, and habits. Metamorphosis can be influenced by exogenous factors, that is the environmental factors, or the endogenous ones, which includes the hormonal, neural, and the sensory factors. In amphibians, anurans show most drastic changes as compared to urodeles and caecilians. Metamorphic changes include ecological, morphological, and physiological changes. Morphological changes encompass regression, progression, and remodeling of organs. Hypothalamus and hypophyseal axis and thyroid gland secrete hormones which control metamorphosis. Two major set of hormones, that is the thyroid hormones, in which T3 and T4 are present, out of which T3 is more active or more potent. And the second is prolactin, control all the events of metamorphosis in amphibians. It is the ratio of concentration of thyroid hormone to prolactin which actually regulates the onset, timing, and proper sequence of metamorphosis, and thus forms three stages: the pre-metamorphosis, pro-metamorphosis, and metamorphic climax. Successive metamorphosis events respond to higher threshold value of hormone than the preceding ones. Metamorphosis in insects involves shedding of old cuticle and laying of new one during sequential steps of molting or ecdysis. Metamorphosis can be ametabolous type, hemimetabolous type, or a holometabolous type. Each part of the adult develops from a group of undifferentiated cells which are called imaginal discs, lying in epidermal pockets in the larva. Metamorphosis involves apolysis, laying of epicuticle, laying of exocuticle, which is followed by secretion of endocuticle by epidermal cells, followed by ecdysis, tanning of exocuticle, and eclosis of the adult. Insect molting and metamorphosis are controlled by the steroid hormone 20-hydroxyecdysone and ecdysone. Hormonal regulation involves neurosecretory cells of the brain which secrete prothoracic hormone, prothoracic gland which secrete ecdysone, and corpora elytra which secrete juvenile hormone. Ecdysone is activated to 20-hydroxyecdysone which promotes molting. Juvenile hormone inhibits metamorphosis. The ratio of 20-hydroxyecdysone to juvenile hormone determines the next developmental stage after each molt. In both amphibians and insects, hormones bind to nuclear receptors which dimerize with another receptor to release inhibition on transcription of certain genes, thereby promoting metamorphosis. In insects, gene activation is linked to puffing pattern in polytene chromosomes, which is characteristic of different stages. So after having a thorough discussion of the events involved in metamorphosis, it's time that you start thinking on certain questions. Number one, why do you think nature invests in the process of metamorphosis at all? Number two, what experiment was done by W. Aitken in 1968 that helped him conclude that the spacing between metamorphic events depends on the concentration of thyroid hormone? So here it is advised to read the experiment that Aitken performed. Number three, comment on the role of apoptosis in metamorphosis. Then describe life cycle of butterfly in terms of complete metamorphosis. Here you can draw the complete life cycle of butterfly. What other functions beside molting do the neurosecretory cells of brain and corpora elata perform in insects? We discussed this in between. What will happen if corpora elata are removed experimentally from the caterpillars, that is the larva of the moths? Can studying insect metamorphosis and its hormonal regulation offer any solution to control their population as a pest? And what similarities do you find between metamorphosis in amphibians and in insects? These are the certain references, the books which were consulted for the preparation of this lecture. Hope you had a good time learning with me. Thank you.